Matapos ang kanyang naging kampanya sa Miami Open, muling magbabalik aksyon ang Filipina tennis ace si Alex Eala sa Linz Open sa Austria, ang kanyang unang torneo sa clay court ngayong season. Matatandaang nagtapos sa isang round of 16 exit ang kampanya ni Eala sa kanyang muling pagsalang.
Alex Eala hadn't played a single point in Austria yet. She hadn't even checked into her hotel. But the moment she stepped through that airport, Philippine flags shot up, cameras pushed forward, and the noise climbed to levels most tennis players only hear after lifting a trophy. The WTA was paying attention, and honestly, more than a few of them had to be sitting with some discomfort. So, do you think Alex Eala can make a genuine run on clay this season? Or is it still too soon to say? Drop your take in the comments right now. Let's start with what actually went down at that airport, because the footage tells a story that no ranking graphic can come close to capturing. March 25th and 26th, Linz, Austria. Alex Eala walks into the arrivals area and is immediately swallowed by a wall of Philippine flags, cameras stacked 2 and 3 rows deep, and supporters screaming her name loud enough to shake a hallway that was never designed to hold that kind of electricity. She hadn't struck a single ball on Austrian ground yet. The draw hadn't been released. The tournament wasn't scheduled to begin until April 6th. And still, the welcome she received looked like someone had already won something. It looked like a homecoming. It looked like a city that had already decided this person mattered long before she had a chance to prove it. That is not how tennis normally operates. This sport tends to reward you after the fact. You win the match, then the crowd erupts. You knock out the top seed, then the cameras find your face. You raise the trophy, then the headlines pour in. The sequence is almost always performance first, recognition second. What happened in Linz flipped that completely. The recognition arrived before the first serve. The atmosphere declared she mattered before a single point was played. And that shift, that reversal of the usual order, is precisely what makes this story worth your full attention. She walked into that airport as the world number 29, which is already a staggering position for a 20-year-old to occupy. But the people waving those flags weren't reacting to a number on a ranking sheet. They were reacting to everything she has become over the past several months, a name that travels ahead of her, a player whose very presence shifts the energy of any event she enters, and a story that has clearly outgrown the sport's usual pathways for discovering new talent. Now, let's be straight about where she was coming from, because the full picture matters here. Just days before those airport videos started spreading across the internet, Eala had walked off a court in Miami after a 0-6, 2-6 loss to Karolina Muchova in the round of 16. That is a brutal scoreline by any measure. No sets taken, barely any games, the kind of result that can make a solid week feel like it ended in a wreck and leave a player questioning everything she built over the previous 2 matches. It was a tough afternoon. But here's the thing. The 2 matches before that loss were not minor. On March 19th, she ground through a 3-set war against Laura Siegemund, winning 6-7, 6-3, 6-3. On March 21st, she took down Magdalena Frech, 6-3, 7-6. 2 wins in Miami at that level. Against those opponents, that is a legitimate week of tennis. The Muchova match stung, but it did not erase what came before it. And Eala knew that. After the loss, she said she left the court a little disappointed, completely understandable, but that she was genuinely happy with her performance across the week overall. She also called Miami her first Sunshine Double, saying it would always hold a special place in her heart. That is the language of someone who can absorb a painful ending without letting it rewrite the entire story. She held onto the parts worth keeping, filed the rest away, and pointed herself toward Austria. That kind of response deserves more credit than it typically gets. Plenty of players at 20 years old let a bad loss follow them into the next week. The score haunts practice. The confidence cracks in tight moments. Eala moved on from Miami in a way that was noticeably clean and deliberate. She reset, confirmed her schedule, and a few days later she was walking through an Austrian airport into a wall of flags. The Miami run also had broader context worth noting. Before it, she had put together strong weeks in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, followed by a breakthrough stretch in Indian Wells, and then Miami's round of 16. The trajectory across the opening months of 2026 has been consistent in a way that is genuinely hard to dismiss. Different cities, different draws, different conditions, and the results keep pointing in the same direction. That is not a hot streak. That is a player finding her altitude and learning how to stay there, which makes Linz a fascinating next chapter. The Upper Austria Ladies Linz runs from April 6th through 12th at the Design Center. The 2026 edition marks the first time in the tournament's history that it is being played on indoor clay. The event has been running since 1987 on indoor hardcourt. This year, it made the conversion to clay, which means every player walking into this tournament is dealing with a new surface identity. Not just the competitors, but the event itself. Eala enters as one of the highest-ranked names in a 2-8-player field. She arrives as a top seed at a clay event that is itself still figuring out what it wants to be in its new format. For a player who has been building her game on hardcourt and is now pivoting into her clay season, Linz represents a collection of firsts all at once. First WTA 500 clay event, first appearance on indoor clay at this level, and the first real test of whether what she has constructed on hard courts translates when the bounce slows down and the surface demands a different brand of patience. That is a legitimate question. It would be intellectually dishonest to pretend otherwise. The losses to Linda Noskova in Indian Wells and to Muchova in Miami both were on hard courts, and both were fairly one-sided. The step into this clay environment carries genuine uncertainty with it. Indoor clay is its own animal. The ball sits heavier, movement patterns shift. Some players who absolutely dominate on hardcourt struggle to find any rhythm once the pace drops and the rallies stretch long. That is a fair thing to wonder about, but that question is exactly why the airport scene carries so much weight. The people who traveled to Linz, waited in the arrivals hall, pulled out Philippine flags, and cheered for a 2-0-year-old tennis player before she had touched a single ball on Austrian soil. They were not reacting to a surface type or a draw sheet or a projected first-round opponent. They were reacting to what she represents. And that kind of backing does not just feel good in the moment. It changes what is possible. It generates an energy inside the building that every opponent has to walk into without having. It means she is never playing in an empty room even when the crowd is divided. That is armor. Genuine, real armor. And the man who understands her game better than almost anyone has been crystal clear about what this moment demands. Joan Bosch is Eala's traveling coach. He has been with her through this entire rise, managing her development through the wins and the difficult losses, building the habits that have carried her to world number 29 at just 20 years old. And his standard for what comes next is not soft. He has said plainly, we cannot stay at the same level. That is not a motivational speech for a pre-match pump-up. That is a coach telling his player that the comfort zone is the danger zone, and that every new stage requires a new version of the player stepping onto the court. Indoor clay at a WTA 500 is exactly the kind of new stage he means. It is not demanding that she be brilliant from the first ball. It is asking her to compete, to adapt, to handle the first uncomfortable moments of a new surface with the same composure she showed after Miami. And if that airport was any indication, the belief surrounding her is not fading. It is growing. The question now is whether she can match it with results, because belief and performance need to start feeding each other. Right now, the belief is loud, visible, and undeniable. The results have been trending upward, but have not yet produced that single defining moment on the grandest stage, the week where everything locks in and the performance matches the energy that follows her everywhere she goes. Linz might not be that week, or it could be exactly that week. Indoor clay, new format, one of the top seeds in the field, a crowd that already knew her name before she ever served. Every ingredient is sitting right there on the table. Here's what a first-round win in Linz actually does to the narrative. Not a final run, not a title push, just a composed, professional opening round win on this new surface. It immediately shuts down the can-she-handle clay conversation before it ever fully gets off the ground. It positions her as someone who moves between surfaces without losing her form. It sends a message to every other player in the draw that the girl from the airport is not just a compelling story, she is a problem to prepare for. And the road beyond Linz only gets steeper. The European clay season runs through some of the most important events on the calendar: Madrid, Rome, and eventually Roland Garros. If she builds genuine confidence in Austria and carries that momentum forward, the clay swing could become the stretch of the season where her ranking takes another serious leap. But even before Madrid or Paris enter the conversation, Linz is the test that proves she can show up in a brand new environment, absorb the weight of expectation, and deliver. The scene at that airport was one of the most striking images women's tennis has produced in a long time. Not because airports are dramatic backdrops, but because of what it revealed about exactly where this player stands in the sport right now. She is 20 years old, ranked 29th in the world, and fans are traveling across the globe to wave flags in European arrival halls before she has touched the court. The WTA has a lot of players. Very few of them produce that. Some people inside the sport have been watching her rise with genuine admiration. Others have been watching with something much closer to discomfort. Because when a player begins pulling this level of attention, not after a Grand Slam, not after a year-end championship, but mid-season at 20 years old, it starts to redistribute how the sport's spotlight gets shared. And redistribution is never comfortable for the people who benefited from the previous arrangement. The WTA has been searching for new faces to carry the sport forward for some time now. The names that defined a generation ago are either retired or approaching the finish line. New stars have stepped up, but the global spread of genuine star power, the kind that crosses borders and pulls entirely new audiences into the sport, that is rare. What Eala represents for the Philippines, for Southeast Asia, for every fan who sees themselves in someone who does not fit the traditional mold of a tennis star that goes far beyond rankings and results. It is the beginning of a different kind of reach for the entire sport. And the WTA knows it. The tournaments know it. The broadcasters know it. The players who walked into Linz and saw those airport videos on their phones know it too, whether they say so out loud or not. The clay season is open. The draw is in. The court is waiting. And Alex Eala walked into Austria with flags behind her and a coach who refuses to let her stand still. Whatever unfolds in the first round, the second round, or further down the bracket, nobody in that building is going to pretend she is just another name on the entry list. The airport already settled that question. Alex Eala walked into an Austrian airport and received a welcome that most players spend their entire careers hoping for and never get. She hadn't played a single point in Linz, and the building already knew exactly who she was. The clay season is just getting started, and this story is only going to keep growing.